Computer programs often need to repeat a number of statements. If that's the case, the programmer would enclose those statements in a loop. In Python, we can create loops with the while keyword. This program will show you a number of ways that you can use while and something that you have to watch out for. So let's take a look at a first example here. We're going to set a variable num to a value of 12, and here's our first while loop. When you create a while loop, you start it off with the keyword while, and then you create an expression here using a relational operator. I'm using the less than operator in this case, and I've got here while num is less than 10. So that expression will evaluate to true or false. If this expression is true, this loop will start and it'll continue to run and print out this value here as long as num is less than 10. Well, the problem is with this case that num is 12, num is not less than 10, and so this is going to be false from the get-go. This loop will never start. This loop won't be entered, and we won't see any output from this. Just to verify that, I'm going to run this program. And as you can see, we get no output whatsoever. Okay, so that's something that can happen with while loops. Let's take a look at another type of loop. Now in this case, we've got an endless loop. So I've commented it out. I'm going to uncomment it now, which I can do up here. And that makes it back actively in the program. And what we got here is an endless or infinite loop. Now, num is still 12. Look at the expression this time, while num is greater than 5. Well, 12 is greater than 5, isn't it? So therefore, this loop should start. Because that is true, this loop should start, and it should print out num. And then we're using the end operator with a single space in between the apostrophes here. That'll space out the numbers all in the same line. The end operator cancels the normal new line that print causes. And so these num values will print out all on one line. However, when I run this one, let's see what happens here. You get an endless loop. It's just going to continue to print 12. And it's going to keep running like that until the power goes off or until my computer breaks down. It's an endless or infinite loop. A programming error, usually. There are some special situations where an endless loop can be a good thing, but as a rule, it's a programming error. So why do we have the endless loop? By the way, we can stop it here with clicking on this. We can kill it. And why we have an endless loop is num is greater than 5. That expression evaluates as true because 12 is greater than 5. It's going to print out num, but there's nothing that changes the value of num. Num stays at 12, and 12, of course, is greater than 5, so this condition stays true. So this just keeps printing out num, separated by a space, and we actually get a word wrap effect after it's printed out an entire line. So it just fills up the screen with 12s, an endless loop. So let's look at another example that's not endless. Here's a working while loop. Now this is very similar. The code is very similar to the previous one. I've just modified it slightly. I've got while num is greater than or equal to 0. That's how you do greater than or equal to with the relational operator. And in this case, this loop should start because 12, we're still at 12, num is still 12 initially. So 12 is greater than or equal to 0, so that's true. So therefore this should print out the value of num, a space. It won't do the new line, it'll print a space so that all the numbers will come out in one line. Now, here we have some code that's going to prevent this from being an endless loop. We're going to subtract 1 from num each time the loop cycles. So eventually, num is going to get down to 0, and this expression will become false after that. So let's see how this one runs. Yeah, there's the output. We got from 12 down to 0. And when it got down to 0, it stopped. So this is a working while loop. And in this case, we're descending, obviously, from 12 down to 0. So we have the minus equals. What's that minus equals means? It means take the value of num, subtract 1 from it, and reassign it to num. So just reduce num by 1. Let's look at one more example. Here's another loop that's a working loop. Now this last one, you'll notice that when I click the cursor at the end of this line here, this line has not finished yet. So in order to finish that line, I put in a blank print statement here. That'll finish the line. And now we're going to reassign, well, we're going to use a different variable number this time. We're going to assign it a value of 10. And look at our while loop this time. While number is less than or equal to 100. So as long as that is true, this loop should cycle. Well, 10 is less than 100, so this should get started. This loop will be entered, and it should run this code here. And what we're going to do is we're going to print out the number, and then a tab, \T is an escape code is called for tab. It's just as if you press tab on the keyboard. So that'll print number, a tab, and then by using the double asterisk operator, that's the arithmetic operator for doing exponents. So that's going to square number. And this should all print out on one line separated by a tab. And that'll create a nice column effect, as you'll see. Now, in order for this loop to eventually finish, so that's not an endless loop, we've got to get number eventually up to 100. So what we decided to do here is we're going to add 10 onto the value of number each time the loop cycles. Plus equals 10. We'll add 10 onto the value of number. Let's see how this one runs. There's the output. And as you can see, we get 10, then the square of 10 over here. 20 squared is in fact 400, and so on. And when it gets up to 100, it stops. Now we could certainly change this. We can do other things. It's not uncommon if you're writing a more complex program than this one that you might have dozens or even hundreds of statements inside the while loop. We've just got 2 here. But remember that if you don't do something to make this condition up here eventually false, you've got an endless loop.